This is an ABC News special report.
Good morning, I'm Diane Macedo. We're coming on the air because President Biden is about to address the nation from the White House about campus protests across the country. The president's been under growing pressure to respond to those demonstrations. We're going to go over to the White House. Here's President Biden.
Before I head to North Carolina, I wanted to speak for a few moments about what's going on our college campuses here. We've all seen the images, and they put to the test two fundamental American principles. Excuse me. The first is the right to free speech and for people to peacefully assemble and make their voices heard. The second is the rule of law. Both must be upheld. We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. The American people are heard. In fact, peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to consequential issues. But neither are we a lawless country. We are a civil society, and order must prevail. Throughout our history, we've often faced moments like this because we are a big, diverse, free-thinking, and freedom-loving nation. In moments like this, there are always those who rush in to score political points. But this isn't a moment for politics. It's a moment for clarity. So let me be clear. Peaceful protest in America. Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest. Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear in people is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Dissent is essential to democracy, but dissent must never lead to disorder or to denying the rights of others so students can finish the semester and their college education. Look, it's basically a matter of fairness. It's a matter of what's right. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos. People have the right to get an education, the right to get a degree, the right to walk across the campus safely without fear of being attacked. But let's be clear about this as well. There should be no place on any campus, no place in America for anti-Semitism or threats of violence against Jewish students. There is no place for hate speech or violence of any kind, whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or discrimination against Arab Americans or Palestinian Americans. It's simply wrong. There's no place for racism in America. It's all wrong. It's un-American. I understand people have strong feelings and deep convictions. In America, we respect the right and protect the right for them to express that. But it doesn't mean anything goes. It needs to be done without violence, without destruction, without hate, and within the law. You know, make no mistake, as president, I will always defend free speech, and I will always be just as strong in standing up for the rule of law. That's my responsibility to you, the American people, and my obligation to the Constitution. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, have the protests forced you to reconsider any of the policies with regard to the region?
No.
That's President Biden responding to a crackdown on protests at UCLA campus. The president saying that we are not an authoritarian nation that squashes dissent, but that while peaceful protest is protected, violent protests are not. I want to go to ABC's Trevor Ault, who's there at UCLA. Trevor, this comes after a lot of pressure on the president to respond to protests, not only at UCLA, but at universities across the country. So just paint the picture of the latest of what has been happening there at UCLA and what happened there overnight to trigger the response.
Yeah, I mean, it was truly a chaotic night here at UCLA, Diane. So what we saw was a massive law enforcement response after last night. The UCLA police declared what was an encampment that was here. You see what is left of it now. This was declared an unlawful gathering. So we watched the California Highway Patrol load up in riot gear, hundreds of them come up here. All of this debris that you see here behind me, this was all set up as a barricade to the encampment. And we watched law enforcement peel it apart piece by piece, surround those demonstrators, and basically restrict and shrink that encampment until they were one by one. Now, I do want to specify from at least what we saw, this was a largely peaceful demonstration, at least in terms of the protesters not fighting back against the law enforcement presence that was there, but they also didn't necessarily give themselves up. And so law enforcement basically pushed them up against that library till it was one-on-one. They pulled them apart, put them into zip ties, and took them away. And what we've heard from California Highway Patrol so far is that at least 132 people have been arrested here for this unlawful gathering. But as we have seen in the past with a number of other encampments that have been broken apart by law enforcement, it doesn't necessarily squash the movement. Certainly this is a nationwide movement. But even here at UCLA, after they swept through and moved this encampment out, there were already protests happening just outside it from people who were supporting the people who were just arrested here. So as you see one encampment pushed out, more movements continue to sprout out, and that's been playing out across America. It likely will continue after today, and it likely will continue after President Biden's remarks, Diane.
And our Selena Wang asked the president there if he thought the National Guard should be brought in. He said no. I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, for a little bit more on that. Because, Mary, this also comes as the president is trying to encourage this ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. How does this all fold together now with that in the background?
Yeah, well, certainly the White House is watching very closely to see Hamas's next move here. The mood here is, I would say, cautiously optimistic. They have urged Hamas to take the new deal on the table. This would be for a temporary ceasefire along with the release of the remaining hostages. But what you saw here today was the president trying to walk this really fine line. He is, of course, backing the importance and the need for free speech while also coming out and trying to condemn violence, condemn hate speech, condemning anti-Semitism. You heard the president say point blank, peaceful protest, of course, is allowed, but violent protests are not protected. The president saying there's not the right to cause chaos. This isn't a situation where anything goes. And then you heard the president also make a political point here, because he is also well aware that he has been under a lot of pressure to say more and to speak out more forcefully. This is the first time we have heard from the president on these protests in 10 days. That was before, of course, the situation really escalated to what it is now, to what Trevor just described. But President Biden saying there, this is not a time to score political points, saying this is not a moment for politics, because, of course, as we saw yesterday, his top rival, Donald Trump, has been out there on the campaign trail criticizing the president for not speaking out more about this and also painting a picture of real violence. He said that New York is under siege. That certainly is not the case, but Donald Trump is running, trying to promote himself as someone who can take on crime in this country. He has seized on these protests to try and make a political point. The president here trying to counter that as well, Diane.
And Trevor, the president saying that students have a right to free speech, but they also have a right to get an education, to get a degree, to walk across campus safely. So any more from the universities and police on what they plan to do to protect those rights going forward?
At this point, it's not clear yet, Diana, as since this encampment has been cleared out, but you could tell that the university up to this point a little bit had their hands tied. At the beginning, when this encampment first began about a week ago, the university was relatively hands-off compared to what we've seen on other campuses. What I think really ignited things was mainly 2 nights ago. So UCLA, maybe more than any other school, has had a very prominent presence of counter-protesters, pro-Israeli demonstrators. And we actually saw a few violent altercations between the two groups where some pro-Israeli demonstrators tried to tear down this barricade. We did see some people throw fireworks into the encampment. And there actually was some criticism towards law enforcement for not moving in more swiftly and on that evening. Clearly now, the university has decided this has gone a bit too far. It was university police that decided this was unlawful, but I do think there's going to be some concern that we might just see another encampment to come and replace this one, Diane.
And we will continue to monitor the developments there and at campuses across the country. Trevor Ault, Mary Bruce, thank you. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live and on abcnews.com, and we'll have a complete wrap-up on World News Tonight with David Muir. I'm Diane Macedo in New York. Have a great day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.